Today we have with us the youngest Indian I've ever had on this show as part of the Voice of the Young series. He's 17 years old. I had originally thought it would be from 19 to 26 years, but Ranveer at 17 is well qualified. So, hello everyone. We have today with us Ranveer Ratra, 17 years old and quite accomplished. So let's hear from Ranveer. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Mathur, firstly, for letting me on this platform and inviting me here. So before I begin talking about anything, I just want to sort of introduce myself. I am Ranveer Ratra. I'm currently studying in my second year of the diploma program at Pathways School, Gurgaon. As Sir said, I am 17 years old, and I actually have a great enthusiasm for economics and mathematics. Those are the two things that I'm majorly interested in. And I'm here speaking on this platform today as I wrote a paper in the past 6 months. It got published. It's called Emissions Trading, Carbon Credits, and Energy Saving. That is the topic of my paper. And I think before we begin, we have to understand what exactly led me to coming to this stage of writing this paper. So for me, it all began in one of my economics lessons last year, when I was still in 11th grade. We were learning about market failure, I remember, and one of the major problems that we face in modern economies is of climate change and pollution. So most of the climate change solutions that we were studying about were like taxes, subsidies, or government restrictions. And a lot of them seemed to me as if they were, I would say, taking away from the market their natural position, that what I thought of as proper laissez-faire economics, where the market would correct itself and market would establish its own equilibrium, that was being sort of taken away by these kind of government interventions. So when we were introduced to the topic of carbon credits, I found it very interesting. And around that time, a few months later, I got in contact with my mentor who helped me write this paper, Ms. Mahua Mukherjee, who is currently working at the Oxford Institute of Energy Studies. She has great expertise in the subject of environmental policies, along with working at the World Bank, understanding economic policies and how the environment can be improved. So her knowledge really helped me sort of gain proper perspective of what exactly carbon credits and emission trading was, and why it was so important in this process of trying to establish a new world order where we're not only looking at just sort of progressing economically, gaining more monetary value, but also sustainably keeping everything in check. So is it possible that I share my screen?
Yes, please. He's going to show the screen for his paper. Okay, here we are. Okay, can you make it full screen?
Yes, I will just do so.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful.
So the main research question that came to my mind as I started writing this research paper was, how can the modern world prepare itself for the climate crisis in a manner that it does not discount on any progress? Like I said, I always thought in my understanding of economics that we shouldn't sort of discount or take away from the natural market equilibrium that occurs, because there are market forces that are responsible for the supply and demand, or the resources to be allocated in that specific manner. If we try to meddle with that too much, I would say that may lead to something that isn't always favorable. That is my understanding of economics, and that is what led me to go further into an understanding of carbon credits.
Okay, continue, please.
So what exactly have I spoken about in the paper? So the first few things that I speak about in the paper are mostly looking at international carbon markets. I look at specifically the oldest carbon market that has been established, that is the European Union emissions trading system, and even currently the largest carbon market, which is the Chinese emissions trading system. After analyzing these international aspects, I went down and I took a specific focus into India, because that is the country that I reside in, and I believe it has a lot of future scope of growth and development. And because it's one of the fastest developing countries, understanding its aspect in this context of carbon trading was very important. And that's when I came across the Perform, Achieve, and Trade scheme, or the PAT scheme, that a lot of us see nowadays, which is sort of the existing component of an emissions trading scheme that was actually implemented by the government in specific sectors in order to sort of begin a form of carbon trading, but it's not a nationalized, streamlined process as yet. And then I have looked into how it has performed in India and how important it is and whether it's optimal even for a country like India to have such a process in the future. And similarly, then I use all of these points, the values of different carbon markets and their limitations, to come to the conclusion to what is it that can make a carbon market more viable. I will go over all of these points within this short presentation as well, but to get them in a depth, I would still say that you must read my research paper if you can.
Okay, let's continue.
So what does it really mean? What are carbon credits? So basically, my understanding is that it's a market-based strategy for lowering pollution and specifically carbon emissions. That's why it's called carbon credits. And most of them are called emission trading systems, or ETS. So a carbon credit is basically sort of a permit that is given to an organization by a government or an authoritative entity that allows them to emit a certain amount of carbon dioxide or a certain amount of greenhouse gases, providing them with a specific cap on what they can pollute. There's different kinds of carbon emissions trading systems. There's cap and trade system, there's intensity systems, but we'll come to that later on. What we must firstly understand is that a carbon credit is sort of a permission given by a government or an authoritative figure to an organization, allowing it to produce a certain amount of pollution. The intention is to make these credits progressively more expensive. What that would mean is that as an organization, need to pollute a certain amount in order to produce my good or service, so I need to purchase a certain amount of carbon credits.
Yeah.
And hence, as those credits become even more expensive, it's more expensive for me to produce my product. And then I'm not as encouraged to produce the product in that same manner. So I don't want to buy as many credits because I don't want to spend so much of my money simply on trying to get the same production. So then I'm sort of incentivized to move into a different kind of market. Maybe I'll try using renewable energy or different energy sources. And that's what the main intention of the emissions trading scheme or emissions trading systems is. In most systems, the carbon credit is equal to 1 ton or 1,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide, or an oil equivalent as we use in India. And the 1 ton per carbon emission is used majorly in Europe. That is where it's been observed clearly. So as we've already discussed, why is it so important? The importance of it comes through it being mainly a market-based method. Although even if we look at taxes and subsidies, these are all market-based methods, but nothing specifically keeps the equilibrium in its natural state. Everything else would directly impact the equilibrium, changing the market from its current position. A subsidy would directly move the supply curve. Indirect taxes would again directly move the supply curve, making things more expensive, less expensive.
Yeah.
So again, the natural equilibrium that is in the market goes away. So that is where I would say the carbon trading comes in as a sort of a different perspective, a different approach to solving this problem. It has been definitely connected to the extinction of animals and plants that has been continuously happening in the modern world, along with the decline of human health and the quality of life. So in order to solve these problems, going and making the environment sustainable has become of amazing importance, and it is a very pressing issue in the modern time.
Okay.
That is why this becomes so important.
All right, let's go.
Let's see where we've seen it before.
Okay.
Like I spoke about, I'm now going to speak about the European trading system and the Chinese trading system. After the Kyoto Protocol, the European system was the first one to be developed. The Kyoto Protocol was an agreement where a lot of the companies under the United Nations came in and agreed that they needed to do something about the environment. Ever since the Industrial Revolution in the late 1800s, there's been a growing amount of pollution and carbon dioxide being released into the air, and it has grown exponentially since that time. And because of this, a lot of things have declined. And that's where Kyoto Protocol came in to tell them that, okay, we have to do something about this now. We cannot let it go as it is, because it is having negative impacts. And like I said, the European-based system is a cap and trade system. What this means is that in a specific region, like for example, if we take a European country of Spain, so as let's say a energy producer in Spain, I cannot pollute a certain amount or above. I have a cap. And if I cross that cap or that specific barrier, that I can only produce, let's say, 5,000 tons. If I go above that cap, then I must purchase more credits. And these credits are sort of again in the carbon market. So for example, the sustainable company that isn't polluting as much. So I can purchase credits from them, and hence it's a cap, and then I trade to sort of cover up that gap that I lose. And this has been in place since approximately 2001, while the Chinese emissions trading system has been created in 2021. The Chinese emissions trading system actually is very interesting, and I found that is actually practical in a lot of ways. It's based on carbon intensity. So the Chinese emissions trading system currently is being implemented in majorly the energy sector. So energy producers have to sort of only pay in terms of the amount of energy they produce. So it's about the intensity. So there's a ratio that they have that for this much output or a certain amount of output, I can pollute this much. So it isn't that if I'm in, for example, the Shanghai region, I have a cap on, okay, 5,000 tons of emissions. I actually have the permit that if I'm able to produce more, I can actually pollute more as well. But then there's a specific ratio. So as I become more and more efficient, I can produce a lot more with a lot less pollution. And hence, I'm almost, let's say, improving the system because I'm polluting less.
Okay.
But we cannot say one is clearly superior, because we have seen that the European Union system has been in play for so long, and it has worked well. And a lot of the carbon emissions have reduced at a great rate. And there have been downfalls in the Chinese system, because although there's been an increase in the efficiency, there's actually been one pattern that they've observed, that companies are not choosing to switch to renewable energy. They're choosing to make their non-renewable energy more efficient, because that still allows them to, as per the intensity, to pollute as much and produce more. So that was one problem that was there with the intensity-based approach. Although if we combine elements of both of these, possibly if we are trying to create a system in the future, combining these two elements for certain industries, seeing possibly intensity is better for manufacturing-based industry. And for energy industry, maybe a cap is better, because that's where a majority or a very large scale of pollution is done. So all of those factors we can take into account. But if we look at India specifically, right now, as I've spoken about, there's no nationwide program, but India has participated in the international carbon market. There's been $10 billion in foreign direct investment by foreign companies in the IMF, along with the IMF and World Bank, in making India a more sustainable and a more renewable country, changing our sources. There's been a lot of solar projects. There's even been the grid-connected rooftop solar program that has become widely popular in the recent times. But the PAT scheme specifically is more of a top-down scheme, as I'd like to coin here, is that where the government decides which companies and which industries are actually going to be complying with the scheme, and they're being called designated consumers. So they specifically put the PAT scheme on specific consumers, such as the aluminium industry, on the thermal power industry. So all of these specific industries, because they're very energy intensive,
Yes.
along with emission intensive,
Yes.
they've been specifically put in the beginning of the PAT scheme. So as we've seen, the PAT scheme has seen a lot of success. In the first cycle, there was essentially a 5.3% reduce in the consumption of energy by 400 designated consumers, which was greater than the initial target of 4.1%. So we have seen that there's a lot of progress that has been done in these schemes in India as well. Along with that, we've seen that specifically the best performers have been the cement industry and the aluminium industry. But big industries like the thermal power industry, as I've spoken about before, because there's such a large scale of the emissions that they create, even though they've been reduced, they still are not as sustainable as the level at which aluminum or the cement industry have reached. Another aspect of emissions trading that has been produced in India is a renewable energy certificate. So essentially, how previously you were given a certificate to pollute a certain amount, now you're given certificates for using renewable energy. And because there is a renewable purchase obligation, it means that if you are a large consumer or electricity distribution company, you have to make sure that a certain amount of the electricity that you use and buy is renewable. So because of that, a lot of companies have started purchasing more and more renewable energy certificates.
Yeah.
And that has led to even further change to, along with the PAT scheme, to creating a more sustainable space in India.
Okay.
Now, if we look further, what can be India's future? Now, the government of India has announced that they've planned an all-India national carbon market to appear in 2025, which will be based on the PAT scheme, which, to my knowledge and to my understanding of the data, it's a positive. It's definitely a positive because the PAT scheme has been successful. Even if it's not been successful in the thermal power industry, that is one industry that will take a longer time to solve because of its sheer size and emission size. But because industries like the cement industry have improved, it's definitely clear that possibly the services industry will also improve because they have a much lower emissions intensity as well. Along with that, they will increase the flow of these credits and certificates and will expand the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency is currently the main body that governs these schemes, the PAT scheme, along with the Grid Connected Rooftop Solar Program, and even the renewable energy certificates. All of that is being managed by this body, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. But because of the problems with the scale at which India is a very large country, there's a lot of different states, a lot of different types of industries. There needs to be an expansion of the same. And there have been plans announced, but there hasn't been as much talk about that as of the 2025 carbon market.
Mm-hmm.
So what is needed in India's future is one main thing that I observe that is a need in India's future is the reduction of caps. Like we saw here previously in the European system, there's a cap and trade system. So the cap continuously reduces and they become more and more expensive as there's a lower supply of carbon credits. So there's a lower amount that each corporation can produce in terms of emissions. But for India, because it's a developing country, I would say that we need to sort of push even smaller caps because as it's developing, there needs to be a change directly from oil to power. I would not say that we can go on the same trajectory that possibly the United States or European countries went on, because there's, let's say, if they're on a trajectory in terms of energy that is 10 years ahead, we would still be using in 10 years' time non-renewable energy at a very large scale. And for India to progress, I would say that is not the best idea. So if we're looking at smaller measured caps, we'd be directly incentivized to change our energy sources and more incentives being provided that encourage sustainable practices so that even when we're on the path to development, we're taking it with a sustainable approach, which is what such practices, such as the emissions trading scheme, can allow us to do.
Okay.
So as I analyzed all of this data, I was able to come to the main conclusions of what characteristics a carbon system for the future would require. So I would say there's a lot of certification that is needed. For countries like India, even the PAT scheme has used the gold standard certification in order to consult with their verification of whether the companies are actually continuously measuring their emissions correctly. Because there's a lot of, it's not a positive thing, but a lot of companies, what they do is they sort of appear as if that they're not polluting as well, but they'll continuously change their locations. Like, for example, Apple as a corporation in the United States may not be polluting as much, but their production in other countries like China and even in Vietnam, their production is causing a lot of pollution. And because that location has changed, the cap appears to be under, but they're still actually causing a lot of environmental problems in that region. And this is sort of a problem that has been created with a system like carbon credits. And that is why we need more certification and businesses like Gold Standard, which collaborate with the UN can be a solution to the same.
Okay.
And that is what will give us environmental integrity,
Yeah.
because the companies are showing integrity in what they're actually doing and they're showing their true emissions. Only then will we know if we're progressing or not.
Okay.
Along with that, I would say that it requires a great level of stability and to be predictable to an extent. But I would say that we should have a plan that for the next 20 years, how much we reduce the cap each year and
Good.
how we should project to keep the market reducing in size.
Okay.
Because eventually we would want a zero carbon emission. So if we keep a more long-term plan like that, then a carbon market can be more suitable. For example, the Chinese emissions trading system, as I said, due to there being an intensity-based system and the long-term planning not directly being visible, it showed that the companies didn't exactly switch to a renewable source. They just made their non-renewable sources more efficient because there's no long-term goal that shows them that, okay, we must switch our sources to renewable sources. And that I think can be a problem. And I would say it requires more stable and predictable market conditions as well. So, like I said, a greater amount of planning. And lastly, I would say that there would be a more open trading platform. Like, for example, currently, what I'm going back to the Chinese example, their emissions trading system is managed by the Chinese government, and there's a governing body, and they do not allow any third-party verification or intervention in their trading system, which as a country is their own choice of jurisdiction and legislation. But for an international approach to sort of continue and grow in a way where each country progresses equally and has the scope for a more sustainable future, I would say there is a great requirement of organizations like the UN and even the World Bank to sort of come in and observe whether these requirements are being met and whether these international policies can be put into a way where climate change is being solved while progress is still not being discounted. That is the main part of my essay that I will be looking for, and that is the short summary.
Okay.
My essay is available on the International Journal of Social Science and Economic Research, and that is where you can read it.
Okay, Ranveer, thank you so much. But I have just one question. You have this, okay, but before the question, let me say it's very impressive. Your paper is very impressive. Okay, it's a great piece of work. You have thought it all out. You have understood a lot. You have done your understanding of the practical issues and the theoretical issues and laid it all out. Okay. So let me first say it's very impressive. Second question, you said that the question you posed at the beginning of your presentation was without discounting progress, I think, but you didn't discuss that part. So how is your system not going to discount economic progress? Have you thought about it, or is it an unfair question at this time?
I would say that it is what helps us go towards answer. Like the paper that I have done, I would say that it's a step towards answering that question. I wouldn't say that it's completely that the answer is clear now that we should do emissions trading. I would definitely not say that. It's not a perfect system. But I would say that if we're able to understand the way in which an emissions trading system works and take these aspects and apply them in situations like, for example, the intensity method or the cap and trade method, if we're able to show corporations the incentive to change to renewable source without directly saying that, okay, you must stop producing at all and you need to lower your price. All of those restrictions are not put on the corporation. That the progress is exactly stopped. The progress is still present. They're just given sort of an alternative path that allows them to reach a more renewable and sustainable future.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, that's a very welcome answer. Okay, so what's your future? What are you planning to do in the future, or you are not planning? Maybe you're going to let it happen. But what are your thoughts?
Well, currently, as I finish my schooling, I'm planning to attend university and research deeper and study deeper into the concepts of economics and finance and global politics. So those are the main subjects, and along with mathematics, that I'm planning to study.
Yeah.
And as I gain a better understanding of those concepts, I think I can take my research even further. At the university level, possibly I can write more papers.
Yeah.
And I can understand the problems to a greater extent
Yeah.
that I do not understand now. And as I do that, possibly I can create a more solid solution.
Okay. So where are
Because
any
climate
thoughts where you might go for your college or university? Any thoughts on that?
I have a few dream universities.
Well, let's hear your dream.
I'm always scared to say, because I feel like it'll.
All right, don't say
I don't
it.
know.
Okay, don't say it. All right, fine.
But
Okay, all
I
right.
will say it's somewhere in the United States.
Pardon?
I said it's somewhere in the United States.
All right, fine. Don't say it. I don't want you to jinx it. Okay, I think it's very good. I think one thing, if you have the time and energy, you might actually talk to some of the people in the cement business and the others that have been successful. Because I think you have done a good analysis based without any primary information. You haven't collected it yourself. You have really it might be a good idea to actually go and say, look, let's hear from you, the person who has done it or not done it, or what has happened. Might be useful to actually follow up this by saying, look, I talk to the people who are affected by this kind of scheme, and let's hear their perspective, because it's always good to hear the perspective of those who are the target of any policy, rather than just thinking about it in theoretical terms or in international terms or survey terms or whatever data. If you have some contacts and you have enough to show to people, say, listen, I'm still not even in college. Can I just talk to you? And I think that would be very useful to hear. Okay. Definitely. All right. So other than that, you have anything else you want to add? Any tips for anybody, or any thoughts you have about yourself or anything? You're most welcome at this point.
I would definitely say, because it's a platform of economics, I would definitely say that the subject is more complex and diverse than it is taught in the first level. So I would say anybody that listens to this podcast, or I would say Vidped, should definitely try and explore economics to an extent that is outside just of a normal classroom, because that is what unlocks the main extent of it, I would say.
Okay, wonderful, Ranveer. Thank you. We will look forward to catching up with you 1 year from now to see where you have landed, what you have done, and let's just see what you are up to. Okay. So thank you so much. Let's say bye here at this point. I'll be back with another young person or an expert. For the moment, bye to everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.